Hello, Dr. Stedman and Revis.
Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Revis.
Dr. Lamb.
I know Dr. Lamb's with us, but I think you had everything.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Dr. Lamb.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Afternoon.
I will never believe what this day has been. I had a CIS fundraiser with Robinson Community College with their culinary department. I have been selling barbecue plates since early this morning. Anyway, I ran in and took a shower real fast so it wouldn't smell like barbecue. But it has been, we sold over 1,800 plates today.
Wow.
Wow.
It was
Did you
an
cook
amazing.
barbecue yourself?
Yeah, we did it. We partnered with the college and the culinary department, and Chef Lester actually used it with his students, and we had they developed their sauce, the rub, the sauce, everything, and you know how the Boston butts were cooked, and it was called kick butt is what we called it, but it went over. I mean, it was a phenomenal success. And
I like how you sort of just like said that on the sly.
yeah,
That was good.
that's what it was called, kick butt.
That was good.
And it was, I mean, and for our county, it just fits right on in. So
That's perfect.
yeah,
Good for you. I noticed you have on a different kind of hat tonight.
well, listen, I'm not going to stand up. I really have my short pants on tonight, but they're really short pants. But it's been
You had good weather for it. That was good.
a beautiful day. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And it was my first really big event with communities and schools, you know, doing something, and I couldn't have asked for more success. So
That's awesome. Congrats.
That's great.
so, and this is part of my fundraising to raise our, you know, being a nonprofit, you've got to raise your own salaries and everything else you do. So that is part of our 2021-22 year that I'm working on already. So
That's awesome. Congratulations.
thank you. We're going to do our spring gala April the 29th, and it's going to be a completely virtual experience, but we're getting an old theater, and we're going to actually stage it just like it's the real deal.
Oh,
It's going to be like a red carpet event. That's
awesome.
working it. I'm having fun. So tired but having fun. Okay, let me see. We've got a good group so far, 24. Maybe others. Let me go ahead and get this thing. Is this recording on somebody else's end? Because Dr. Lamb, you and Dr. Revis both were on when I came on.
It'd be Dr. Revis.
Dr. Revis, can you see it recording on your end?
I do.
You do? Okay. Then you keep it there. You'll have to process the video for tonight because you're
Okay.
not close. Okay. So if you'll
Okay.
handle,
Now, according to this, if you click on participants, you can tell who's recording. It'll have the little circle and the dot, the red dot.
Okay.
According to this, both of you are recording. I don't know how that is because it only records on one. But no, I noticed when I came on that it was recording Dr. Revis when I came on.
Okay. Well, at the end, if it processes here, we'll talk, Dr. Revis. At the end, one of us is going to process this thing.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I just want to welcome everybody to our Thursday night coaching session. I know it's been a little while since we've met on Thursday nights, but we are at a new venture in this semester, closing out the AAPTEL and beginning our work with the AAPTEL. Dr. Lamb did an excellent job hosting our town hall on Monday evening, and what we're going to talk about tonight is really going to be somewhat of a repeat of a lot of what was said. However, I've laid it out in our agenda so that there will be a little more detail from each of our speakers as they talk about the AAPTEL. And the reason that we're focusing on it is that next week is basically considered spring break. However, you do not need to stop working. So we're going to provide you with the tools that you need so that you can keep on working and stay ahead of the game, and be prepared so that you're not doing a lot of this work. At the end, there's a lot of work with the AAPTEL. So this is basically what it looks like for this evening. I'm just going to give a recap of what the AAPTEL is, and then I've asked Dr. Lamb, Dr. Revis, and Dr. Hamilton if they would take the first 3 tasks and just spend about 5 minutes talking about that so that you will be prepared to move forward. I know some of you work at different speeds. We don't want to hold anybody back, but this will allow you to at least have an understanding of what it is that you've got to do. I'll bring closure to it with just talking about task 4 again, and then if Dr. Crawford's with us, he may have some closing comments about the AAPTEL. If not, we'll bring closure. Dr. Lamb, I put on there the competency folio again. I don't know that we need to talk about it. You can decide, at the end, if there's anything that you need to add differently from what you said on Monday night.
No, I covered that Monday night.
That's what I thought. I do want to say this before we go any further. When you go into task stream and you complete your School of Ed dispositions, please remember what Dr. Lamb told you, that it's have an honest assessment, but if you exceed expectation in any area, you have to provide justification for that. I've sent 2 back because it just said exceeds expectation and there was no justification for that. It's okay for you to say that, but you've got to prove it to us. So just if you got a call back on that, then just make sure that you understand that if you exceed expectation in any area, you have to provide us with additional justification for that. I want to pull up this, and this document, you can find it in your Blackboard under task and prompts, and it would pay you to spend some time looking at this, because what it does, everything that we say, it basically it explains it over and over again what we're talking about. But this simply just gives you a purpose of what the AAPTEL is, and as we've already said, it's for you to demonstrate success as educational leaders in relation to empowering teachers to become effective leaders and decision makers in your schools. The task that we're going to unfold again this evening of the artifact will provide you with opportunities to collaboratively analyze and create a growth plan that reflects the empowerment of teachers. The AAPTEL is going to include relevant research findings on best practices, as we've already talked about, for teacher empowerment and leadership, a visual depiction of best practices, an alignment of theoretical best practices to actual school practices, and the development of a growth plan to resolve school problems. Now, this is where, and Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Revis, I think you'll agree with this. Last semester, we had some concerns because we began looking at the scores of our students, and we felt like, what is happening? What is happening? Because we felt like they had everything there. I think when I went back and I was looking at this, I think that this may be the answer right there. What the AAPTEL will be presented to the school administrative team for their feedback. Notice there's a connecting word, and recommendations regarding a broader presentation to the school improvement team. And when the evaluators are looking at it, I think they're seeing that you presented to your principal, but I don't I think that some students lost points because it showed no evidence of it being presented to the school improvement team. And you would ask yourself, well, why? Well, your school improvement team is made up of teachers. So you're working on a teacher empowerment and leadership plan, growth plan. So of all people, they need to be involved in the process and in the presentation of what you do. So there's two things that you've got to do there. Now, your principal may say, well, you can do it with me and with them. That's okay. But you've got to do it. You've got to take this as much as you can at the end of this semester. You've got to take this before a team of your peers and present it. Now, you may not be able to do the whole school. It can just be a committee of your teachers, but you've got to show evidence that you've done that. And I'm not going to go into the next section completely, but I want you to look at that first sentence. In today's schools, collaborative decision-making is one of the primary leadership functions for a 21st century school executive. And Dr. Hamilton, you probably can attest to that. As a sitting principal, I would have all ideas that when you sit down with your superintendent, that's one of the things that you're evaluated on. Can you make a comment about that before we move on?
Yes, that evidence of that collaborative decision-making is pivotal. And I think that as sitting principals, we have seen that more so now in COVID than ever. Just the importance of that collaborative decision-making, and just that input, and just knowing that, I think how much your staff respects you when you put it out there and you say, how is this going to work? Because then when they're the ones doing the work. And I think that's more pivotal than ever, especially in these changing times when we're not just doing things with automaticity and like we've always done them.
I agree. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to ask Dr. Lamb if he would to, he's going to talk about, over the next few minutes, he's going to go back and talk about task 1 of the AAPTEL.
All right, I'll share my screen. Let me close that. All right, so let me give you a little background here. The 6 evidences of that administrators have to complete and pass at least a proficient level that form your task stream portfolio. There are 6 evidences: AAPTEL, we're on the second one, OMA, SKIP, CAP, and SIOP. Those 6 evidences, the purpose of them is to replicate what you would do as an actual principal in building a school improvement plan. That's the whole notion here. So the very first thing that you did, the AAPTEL, the purpose of that was to develop an instructional component to your school improvement plan. That's not district-based. It's not a canned program. You have to have a closing the gap program in your instructional plan, in your school improvement plan every year. What are you going to do from subgroups, scores in your building? How are you going to close that gap? So that's what we did the first half of this semester. The second half is now that we've done that, we've got to build efficacy and empowerment in our staff, and we've got and when we do that, we have to show that by developing a professional growth plan. That's going to address. That's going to provide a vehicle for teachers to get better in their classroom, which is empowerment as a school leader, and efficacy. That means effectiveness, and also gives them a way to start that road to empowerment as a school-wide leader as well. Remember, big E and little e. Big E empowerment as a school-wide leader, Todd Whitaker. Little E empowerment as a school classroom leader in your own classroom. That's Marzano's high yield strategies. And we have to learn that there's a link between the two. We want our best teachers to be our school leaders, but we can't just pay lip service to it. If you're going to create a culture of teaching and learning in your building where that's the most important thing, then you have to reward good teaching. Well, now, Dr. Crawford nor Dr. Hamilton has extra money that they can give those teachers. The way that they reward those teachers is by leadership positions in their building. And the first of those, according to Todd Whitaker, is to teach other teachers. And so what would we have them teach other teachers? Guess what? We'd have them teach best practices. We've identified them as being our best teachers, those who manipulate those best practices, those high yield strategies, the best in their own classroom. Why shouldn't we have them teach other teachers in the building those same things? Now, when you get with me next semester, when we get to the OMA, we're going to build a master schedule and a budget to support the school improvement plan as well. And one of the things that we have to understand in our school improvement plan, in terms of the master schedule, is we have to have identified who these best teachers are, and we have to have a plan in place. So when you get to the OMA next semester, task 2 of the OMA is simply a copy and paste of tasks 1, 2, and 3 from the AAPTEL. We're setting you up with that piece of it right now. And so you've got to understand, oh, I got to know what teachers should be teaching what. I've got to know who my best teachers are, and then give them the opportunity to be the school-wide leaders. It doesn't do any good to say teaching and learning is what matters in this building. I want you all to be great teachers, and then you reward people who can't teach a lick with leadership positions in your building. You can't let people who just roll the ball out, either figuratively or literally or metaphorically. You can't let those people be your school leaders. They can't be your people who are on your personnel committee, your finance committee, your school improvement team. We need our best teachers. That's the way you reward great teaching, is through leadership positions in your building. And the first of those, of course, is teach other teachers. And so I will show you my professional growth plan. I call mine MTSS for Teachers. I believe you'll find it somewhere in your Blackboard shell. And so I'm going to run through it, and then I'm kind of reverse engineering here. So this is what my professional growth plan would look like. All right, on the teacher work, the first teacher work day that we're all there together, I do a best practices workshop. Now, the length of that workshop would be determined by the adoption of best practices by my staff. Looking at my walkthrough data, and that's what you've got to do. How many teachers are using best practices? If it's only 5%, then it's going to be all day, because everybody needs to hear this again. If there's only 5% that aren't using best practices, it'll be 30 minutes or less, and then we'll break out into other things. But I'm going to start the fall of the year and mid-year. I'm going to make sure that refocus on what we do. And the coin of the realm for us is great teaching. That's what we do. It's instructional delivery. We don't determine which textbooks we use, or we don't determine which reading adoption, or we don't determine if it's common core, standard course of study. Our job is to deliver. That's what best practices are. High yield strategies for instruction, regardless of the content. We're practitioners, and that's what you've got to make sure that you understand. Your job is to make sure that that content is delivered, whatever it is, in that classroom. And so if your faculty isn't doing that, then you've got to redirect them. And then August 25th through January 25th, we're going to work in our PLCs, at least according, again, how often we're going to work in our PLCs in small groups on individual of those 9 high yield strategies, like similarities or differences, cooperative learning, homework. We're going to bring examples in and share in our PLCs. Now, if we've got some that we're hardly ever touching, like non-linguistic representation, that particular strategy, we may have to come and work on PLCs. We may have to do this once a week. It might be once every other week if we're doing a good job with these strategies, but we're going to share, we're going to focus, we're going to hone our craft, we're going to get better. And then we're going to do one-on-one coaching for our new people in the first quarter of the new year for our beginning teachers. But by the second quarter, we're going to be doing one-on-one for people who are not doing a good job in their classroom. We're going to do that, and our walkthrough data tells us who those people are. Now you say, well, Dale, you mentioned something about a master schedule. What's that got to do with this? Here's one of the keys to master scheduling. If Dr. Hamilton is my mentor, and we're both high school chemistry teachers, we can't have the same planning time. That affects your master schedule. You have to unbalance your master schedule so that your mentors and mentees do not have common planning time. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but how can I go watch her teach if I'm teaching? And when we're both on planning, what are we going to do? Go sit in the workroom and look at one another? We need to have our schedules unbalanced so that I can go watch her teach and she can come watch me teach. That's just one of those secrets to the business. If you can do that, you would be amazed how much better your coaching will happen in your building if mentors and mentees can get into one another's classrooms. But if they both have common planning and all they can do is just sit and talk to one another, it won't go well for you on the coaching. I'll tell you that right now. So the first quarter of the new year, you're coaching your new people, and you're adding your low performing teachers by the second quarter. And then we follow this on through for semester 2. Again, at our work day that kicks off our second semester, we usually have a couple of work days in the first semester. Again, I would revisit a staff development. And again, how much I gave them is dependent on how well they're doing. Yeah, that's a Linda Darling-Hammond thing. You know, Linda Darling-Hammond says there's 3 types of staff development: whole group, small group, one-on-one. And you vary the amount according to what your data tells you when you do your walkthroughs and what teachers are doing. And this will lead you to be able to put teachers on an action plan and get you somebody new if they refuse to or can't actually teach school, because that's kind of what we do. I know at some point we've got to where we believe that we can get anybody to do it. That if we make it formulaic enough that we can just hire people off the street, flag cars down. But teaching is a profession, and that's what we do. And if people can't do it, we can't keep them. We can't keep them around because they're good people. You know, one of the things that we tell our doctoral students is you can't truly be a school administrator until you can let good people go that can't teach. Until you can do that, you can't administrate a school. We can't keep people just because they're good folks. If they can't teach, we can't keep them, because that's what we do. We're creating a culture of teaching and learning. Now, I'm not advocating that we just fire everybody out. You can't fire your way to a good school, but you have to make sure that you understand that teaching is what matters. We have so many other things now that have taken the place of good teaching. If you just show up on time and sober, we think that's good enough now. No, it's not. Or that if we make it formulaic enough, that anybody can do it. No. I mean, you know, why is it that the most formulaic job in the world is running the drive-thru at McDonald's? They have buttons with pictures of the food on them, and you still order a Big Mac and coffee, and you get a fish sandwich and a milkshake every time you go through the drive-thru. Why is that? Well, because they don't have very high-level people. So it doesn't matter what formula we have in schools. It requires some competence and some intelligence and some hard work. And people have to develop skill over time. And your job is to make them successful. And this may be the most important thing that you do as a principal, is help your teachers to become successful teachers. I know that sounds redundant, but it's amazing how many folks that we have in the business who actually can't teach. And if you're going to be a successful school, your people have to be able to teach, period. So that's the context of what we're doing here. That's why we're doing the AAPTEL. That's what we're doing. And so what we're going to do in task 1 is we're going to do a literature review. And we're going to learn about efficacy and empowerment as a school leader, and empowerment as a classroom leader. We're going to look again at Marzano for classroom leadership. We're going to look at Whitaker for school-wide leadership, and we're going to look at Linda Darling-Hammond for staff development models. And so when we go to that, so again, here's what we do. And here's our task 1. If I got the right one, yeah. And these are going to become our headings. The first heading after we do our background information, school and community, that comes straight out of your AAPTEL. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use the same one that you used, your school profile to kick off the AAPTEL, put it in the AAPTEL. And our first section is building efficacy and empowerment among staff. Now, again, remembering efficacy and empowerment, or that's empowerment. Efficacy is being effective in your classroom. Empowerment is as a school leader. Sometimes we call them empowerment as a school leader, as a classroom leader. Sometimes refer to them as efficacy. That's inside your classroom. Results-oriented professional development, recruitment, placement, and mentoring of school staff. That's what the plan does. You just saw that. That's what my plan was about. Approaches for evaluation of school staff and teacher leadership and decision making. And then you're going to identify your two instruments. Again, you can survey for school-wide empowerment. Again, and here are those 5 things right here from Todd Whitaker. Teacher has input in professional development offerings at school. That means you teach other teachers. Development of school improvement plan, that's a school improvement team. School-wide policy, that's curriculum, that's your curriculum team. Your budget team, and then your personnel team. It's a hierarchy. Now, we're not going to be concerned about getting teachers these opportunities 2 through 5, but what we are is we want to identify who our best classroom teachers are and use them to teach those other staff development, be mentors, lead those PLCs, and be mentors for that one-on-one. That's who we're identifying, these people right here, and empowering them in that first level of school leadership. Now, if your district doesn't have a walkthrough instrument where you do walkthrough, 15-minute walkthroughs, simply use this one. Now, you can't survey for best practices because that's an IQ test. Everybody will tell you they use best practices. You do 2 or 3 on people that'll let you come, and then you ask your administrators for their walkthrough data, and you basically, what percentage of the faculty is using each of these 9 things, and which ones don't get used a lot, and overall, how much are we doing best practices, or whatever the bulk of your walkthrough instrument is. Now, all of your walkthrough instruments will be based off of this. It may not read just like this, but it'll be based off of this. And so that's what we're looking to do, is we're looking to do our literature review in these areas, and then identify the instruments that we're going to use. You may find something more modern that you like better than Whitaker for school-wide empowerment. And you may have a walkthrough instrument for your district that doesn't look exactly like these high-yield strategies from Marzano. But it's got to be about teaching. It can't be other things. It's got to be about what goes on in the classroom, and it's got to be a walkthrough data instrument. And of course, after you then identify the instruments that you're going to use, and it says create, but that you can't just make one up. Create means use this one if you don't have one for your district. And then you're going to go out and actually gather that data and present that data in task 2. Again, you can survey for school-wide empowerment. We want you to do a couple of walkthroughs or 3. Walkthroughs or virtual sit-ins on classes, 15 minutes, and we want you to collect the data from your administrator. I just ask them. They don't have to give you people's names, and that's how that's what you're going to get the data for in task 2. All right, and present that data. All right, I think I did 1 into 2 there, so I think I'm through.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lamb. Dr. Hamilton, if you will move on to the overview of task 2 of the AAPTEL.
I will. I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Lamb just said about observing your teacher leaders and letting other staff members in your school observe your teacher leaders. In 20+ years of being a school administrator, I would argue with you the most powerful thing I've ever done is over the last few years, which is having guided classroom observation walkthroughs of my entire staff. I started it probably 8 years ago with new teachers I had coming in, and I wanted them to know how we did things at our school. So I would take our BTs or our new teachers who just came in from other places and let them observe those teacher leaders and those good teachers. And we had so much success from that, we started making that a school-wide thing over the last few years. And what that does for vertical alignment, common language, it is the most powerful. And of course, I'm going in, my assistant principal, my coach, I have a person from HR who comes in and helps facilitate. So we're all doing this, and we have a reflective time after, reflective time before, what we're looking for. And it is probably the most powerful thing, and my teachers report that in the surveys, is that it is the very best professional development they get, is being able to go in and look at those teacher leaders in our school and learn from them, and what it does for our students. It's powerful. So don't underestimate what's going on in your school, especially with those good teacher leaders. It's strong. So in prompt 2 of the AAPTEL, just let me see if I can pull this up, if I can share. So Dr. Lamb went over prompt 1. And so then in prompt 2, you're going to take, in task 2, Dr. Lamb went over task 1. In task 2, you are going to take what you did in task 1, and you're going to apply that to task 2. So in task 2, I'm not going to share right now. So in task 2, you are going to observe. You're going to take those instruments that you created or that you're using for task 1, and you're going to observe and you're going to collect data using that checklist. So you're going to go into hopefully at least 3 to 5 classrooms with your checklist to observe. More if you can. It depends on what your situation is right now with COVID. You're going to administer the survey that you have in task 1. Probably the best, most effective way to administer that survey is like through some kind of Google form, SurveyMonkey or something like that. You're going to analyze the data that you gather from your walkthrough observations with that checklist, and then you're going to take the information that you get from the survey, and you're going to use other sources. So let's say you can only go in and observe, do walkthroughs in 3 classrooms. Maybe sit down with your principal and ask your principal, because your principal has been observing all year. Your principal has done formal observations. Your principal has done walkthrough observations. So let's say that you sit down with your principal and you just talk about data trends. And just like Dr. Lamb just said, your principal doesn't have to share names, but your principal can share data trends that they recognize from that they have collected through their own observations. So you're going to take all these things. You're going to take the observation walkthroughs that you do. You're going to take your survey data that you do, and you're going to triangulate that with the research that you did in task 1, prompt 1. And you're going to compare and contrast what you learned in each of your 5 research topics that you conducted with the data that you've collected in your school. So you want to compare what you learned in the research with what's happening in your school. So in task 2, prompt 1, you'll use this comparative analysis to narratively describe the similarities and differences between what your research said and what you're seeing in your building. So this means when you're talking about what the research says in this task 2, prompt 1 narrative, you're going to cite research. Remember, when you talk about what you read, you have to cite that. And then this is going to be followed by evidence from your surveys and your checklist that substantiates either, hey, the research said we should be doing this, and we are. This is what I saw. This is what the survey says. This is what my checklist, my observation shows. Or you can say, wow, the research says this should be happening, but I didn't see that happening in my school. Or the teachers didn't report that this was happening in my school. So in those 5 areas that you're going to be writing on in the narrative, you're going to talk about your research and you're going to cite that. And you're going to also tie in the perception from the surveys and from your walkthrough checklist. So here's an example for you. So under week 8 in Blackboard, Dr. Revis has an awesome PowerPoint in there about professional development. And on one of the slides in that PD PowerPoint, she has some research. Now remember, PD, you do need to cite Darling Hammond, so let's not forget that. But she has a great slide in there from some research from Joyce and Showers on the topic of research, results-oriented professional development. And Joyce and Showers showed that for professional development to actually transfer to student achievement, because this is why we do PD, right, is to improve student achievement. Teachers have to receive ongoing support and guidance once they start implementing the training in classrooms. So let's say that that's your research. And on your survey, 100% of your teachers responded that they have input into staff development and they feel great about staff development in their school. And let's just say that you just happen to know, because of course you're in your school, that your school has had thinking maps training all year. So when you go in and do your checklist and your walkthroughs, you see no evidence of thinking maps. So in that narrative under the professional development section, you would be reflective of the research that shows that for PD to have an impact on student achievement and learning, teachers have to receive ongoing support, feedback, guidance, that kind of thing. And you can then reflect. In our survey, 100% of our teachers said that they feel really confident that they've had input into PD and that they're good with PD. Yet, when you did your walkthrough, you didn't see any evidence that the PD that they have received is transferring into their practices. So that would be an identified gap in your school between what the research says and what is actually happening. So that would be an example of an identified gap that you could make based on your work. So in prompt 1, task 2, prompt 1, you write about it in the narrative. And then in task 2, prompt 2, you're going to show us the results of your observational walkthroughs. You're going to show us the results of your survey. You're going to visually show us to that with just some brief narratives. So in task 2, prompt 2, you're going to just start by saying you researched, you surveyed X number of teachers, and you did walkthroughs, X number of walkthroughs. And so let's just say you did your survey in a Google form. So a great way to show that graphically is if you went to the response section and you did screenshots of the responses of each of your questions. And then each of those would be figures. And remember that our figures are labeled figure, whatever sequence they're in. They have a brief title, and then underneath there's this little note that says what this shows us. And then you can do the same thing for your checklist. What percentage of the classrooms did you see these best practices in? And so then you just show that in those graphic representations. And then at the very end, just sort of tie it up with a summary of, and remember to include your PLC team, that your team and you analyzed and triangulated these data points, and that these are the gaps that you all determined that are found between what the research says are best practices and what's missing in your school. And you can also add to that the things that you find aligned with the research if you so choose. But so that's just what that is taking what you've created in task 1 and then applying it in task 2.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hamilton. And we're going to move on. Dr. Revis, task 3 of the AAPTEL, the Leadership Growth Plan.
Okay, on task 3, I'm going to share my screen. Back to the template. And let's just recap. I like to summarize, okay? So in task 1, what you're doing is your research. In task 2, You're administering your survey and checklist, you're gathering data, you're analyzing that data, and you're comparing it to your research to identify your gaps. You're doing that gap analysis. So what you do in task 3 is you're going to develop an action plan to address those gaps. So let's say, for example, that one of your findings from your survey is that your teachers report that they do not have a voice or say in hiring new teachers. Well, then in your action plan, there should be an activity aligning with that. You should address that in your action plan. Or let's say that when you do your walkthroughs or you get walkthrough data from your school administrators, that they see there is a low percentage of teachers who are consistently using non-linguistic representations in their instruction. Then we would expect to see an activity in your action plan to address the gaps. The action plan addresses your gaps, and it's the same template that we used in the AAPTEL. I always encourage you to start here first, kind of like a graphic organizer that we always tell our students to do before you start doing your narrative work. You don't have to, but you also have to do this narrative work very, very similarly than what you did in the AAPTEL, describing the different pieces of your action plan. And as Dr. Stedman said, don't forget, you've got to do a presentation. Now, the presentation needs to talk about the research, your data you collected, your gaps, and plan. And that needs to be a presentation to your administrative team and your school improvement team, if possible, during COVID. So again, it's an action plan.
Dr. Revis, I think this is showing the AAPTEL, but you're saying the right things, but it's showing the AAPTEL.
Is it showing the app? So you're right,
Yeah.
it is. I'm sorry, I pulled up the wrong thing.
But you've been talking the right language though.
It's so similar. Anyway,
Yeah.
I apologize.
Okay, and just remember as you go to task 4, task 4 is like task 5 was with the AAPTEL. There's only 4 tasks in the AAPTEL. Task 4 is where you reflect on the remaining 9 competencies. You list 12 of them with the AAPTEL. There are 9 left, and you are to reflect on the remaining 9 competencies for task 4 of the AAPTEL. And that is the AAPTEL. And I'm going to ask Dr. Crawford if he would to kind of bring all of this together. Dr. Crawford is also a sitting principal at an elementary school. And I would like for him to give his wisdom and comments on bringing all 4 of these tasks together. Dr. Crawford.
Hey, good evening. So one of the things that you'll need to learn is to learn how to work smarter and not harder, because the work itself is always going to be hard. You know, there's no expression of making sure you have the right people in the right seats on the bus. And sometimes it may take you a while to get there, but doing that work is going to allow you to do things like Dr. Hamilton did with doing, guided walkthroughs with new teachers, and then have that break out to a school-wide function and just become part of her school-wide norm. Being able to understand how all your data fit together so that you can attack the right problems at the right time with the right people. And like I said, part of being a new principal is you will very quickly learn what you don't know. I can still remember my first year, and I always thought I was a pretty effective assistant principal. Man, that first year when you don't have anybody else to doing a knock on, when everybody's knocking on your door, you quickly learn just how truly ignorant you are. And so that learning process begins, and part of that is going to be really how you organize the work that you do. When you look at both the AAPTEL and the AAPTEL, there's simply ways of organizing work that you're going to be doing as a school administrator, whether it's dealing with personnel, whether it's learning how to manage all of the data that is coming at you, everything from teacher work condition data, everything from EOG data, EVOS data, MAP data if you use that, iStation data, M-class data. And then you get that random phone call from the area superintendent saying, hey, we noticed your suspensions were up 15% over the last 2 weeks. What are you going to do about that? And so you're sitting there trying to juggle just all manner of things. And so, when you look at just how detailed the AAPTEL and the AAPTEL are, yes, there are things that'll get you through a graduate program, but it's really setting the table and the framework for you to be able to juggle and organize all of the official, written and unwritten, and I'm going to use a very technical term here, stuff that just comes at the principal from the time you wake up at 6 o'clock till the time you walk out of that building, whenever that is. Learning how to organize that will keep you sane and keep you away from situations. And Lord knows my first or second year as and I'll be honest, even some of this year, every now and then, folks, you get to a point where you'll say, you know what, I'll wait for the second email. Then I'll know what's really important, and then I'll get back around. You don't want to get that way, but sometimes this comes at you. So when you think of the AAPTEL and the AAPTEL, you really want to think in terms of how you're organizing all of the various aspects of school that you will at some point be responsible for.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Crawford. One more thing I want to pull up before we bring closure. This is in your Blackboard course shell. And again, you need to be very cognizant of this as you are working through, because this document tells you for each of the tasks what you have got to do. If you'll look in this last column, what you've got to do, task 1 through 4, to strive for an accomplished document. So please make sure that you're looking at this, and as you're mapping out the work for the AAPTEL, that you're mapping it out so that you are striving to make sure that you've done everything so that you are competent or you're accomplished. Let me stop the share. Any questions from anybody at this time? From any of the experts that have spoken? So no questions. Dr. Lamb, you have any final comments that you would like to say?
This is the most important thing that you'll do, is develop your teachers, build a culture of teaching and learning in your business, in your building. It's what we do. And I was glad to hear Dr. Hamilton, I've heard it before, but to again reiterate, possibly the best thing that you can do, especially for beginning teachers and for low performing teachers as well, but for all teachers, is get them in the classroom and let them watch the experts at work. Let them watch, not something theoretical, but let them watch the teacher down the hall who can really teach. Let them see what it looks like in real life. I think a lot of the value of you doing the AAPTEL is, again, doing those walkthroughs or those sit-ins, virtual sit-ins if you're still online. I think that has a lot of value for you, and I hope you'll take advantage of that.
Right.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. If you remember in Blackboard, if you go to the AAPTEL template and materials, there's a lot of stuff that we have placed in there that will that will, if you'll open it up, it'll help you in the development of your AAPTEL, and everything that the experts have talked to you about tonight, there's examples of all of that in there to help you get started. So just do that. Dr. Revis, anything in closing?
I don't think so. Again, I hope you have a good spring break next week, and I hope you have some time with your family and stay safe, but also hope you get some good research done as well.
Okay, Dr. Hamilton, you bring the benediction. Thank all of you for your words of wisdom today.
Continue to take good care of yourself first and foremost. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Stay focused. Just continue to chunk away one little bit at a time. You're all doing great. You're actually working ahead of the curve, and you're so strong and you're doing such a great job. Keep up the good work, and we are here for you, and call us anytime if we can do anything to support or help you.
Okay. Thank y'all so much, and we'll be available next week. If you need us, you reach out to us. Otherwise, we will see you in class Tuesday week. Okay?
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.